Welcome to the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast, episode number 155 with Taylor Shire and Darrell Davis discussing the Saskatchewan Roughriders as we are now into the final week of the regular season. Saskatchewan, of course, coming off a bye week in week 20, now set to face the Calgary Stampeders on Saturday in the last regular season game. And what's on the line in that game is frankly up in the air at this point, and really I don't think we're going to know until about an hour before kickoff on Saturday, Darrell.
Yeah, we have to watch that first game, that Winnipeg Montreal game. It feels funny, doesn't it, the last week, not having a game to discuss and wondering what's going on, watching only 3 games on schedule on TV, which is a weird schedule. None of them really meaning anything in terms of what's happening in the standings, but it did show a few teams are ready to be contenders for this Grey Cup, and I still think the Roughriders fit right into that category, Taylor. They're the hottest team in the league with 4 straight wins, and it'll be interesting to see them come back and what they get, how they plan for this final regular season game.
So on Saturday, the Riders need a Bombers loss against Montreal. I believe that game starts at 1 o'clock, and then when Saskatchewan plays at 5, if Winnipeg loses, the Riders will want to beat Calgary to clinch top spot. If Winnipeg wins, the game is sort of meaningless in terms of the standings for the Riders. So it's an interesting situation if you're Corey Mace, the head coach of the Riders, when you decide, obviously you're going to dress your starters and your lineup, but how much playing time is there going to be for a guy like Trevor Harris if the game doesn't mean anything in the standings, and how do you sort of juggle that? Or do you just decide, as the game flows, give Harris the start, and if he wants to come out after the first, he's not going to want to come out, but maybe you pull him after the first quarter. I don't know. It's an interesting scenario that they're going to be faced with, and it'll be a sort of game time decision, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, they don't have much time, and they don't have a whole lot of extra players to play with, right? There's not a whole lot of bodies on the CFL roster. So if they're playing for first place, they better play all out the entire game, right? And I don't, as you said, Trevor Harris won't want to come out as a quarterback regardless, whatever position he's in. But I think you might have to take him out at halftime if it's not a first place game. Let him have some playing time. He's going to get to play in the West semifinal anyway, but just don't take any chances of putting him in there, because we've seen at a couple games that there are guys who go after him. That's just the way football is, right? It's a predatory sport. They're always after. They don't say they're trying to injure people, but even the nicest players want to hit somebody so hard that they knock them into tomorrow. And if they do that to the Riders, well, that's the way it goes. So you have to be careful. Corey Mace will be wary of that, I think, the head coach, and he'll have some extra guys ready to go. And playing time for your backups isn't a bad thing, right? Over the season, they got some playing time in for Shea Patterson and a lot of the backups. So they're a better team now because of it, but you still have to be playing your best when you're headed into the playoffs.
Yeah. In Saskatchewan's last game, before the bye week, Harris took that big hit sort of to the head, and the Lions' defensive lineman was actually fined this week for that hit. A little bit late, but he was finally issued a fine for that. But that's all it takes is one bad hit. It doesn't have to be intentional, right? Sure, there's going to be guys going after him, but also it just takes one sort of fluke injury, and the playoff chances go from, we're looking good, to Shea Patterson's still a good quarterback, but I don't know if he's going to lead this team to the Grey Cup if he's forced into action. They obviously want Trevor Harrison in the lineup, so it's all.
Yeah.
I mean, you do want to be playing your best, but you also don't want to risk the chance of a fluke injury.
Yeah, don't remind me that my NFL team is the Miami Dolphins, right? And they have a concussed quarterback, and suddenly their whole fortunes have changed, right? They're going from a playoff contender to a team that's probably going to get an early draft pick now because they don't have a quarterback because he got hurt. So you can't plan for those things. Football is built around its quarterbacks, right? The teams are. And I've maintained this forever and ever, that no sport is more reliant on one player than the CFL is on its quarterbacks. Even starting pitching, obviously in the majors, doesn't matter as much. Quarterbacks in the NFL don't matter as much. Excuse me, because they're a lot more programmed, although that's changing a little bit. When you see the guys like Mahomes and those guys running around like the CFL quarterbacks used to do, they're given a lot more freedom in the CFL. They're the most important people, and that's why the league has been more exciting this year, because the quarterback level of play has been elevated.
And back to this last weekend, BC obviously put together a big win over the Montreal Alouettes, with Vernon Adams coming in and starting over Nathan Rourke and looking good. And I think he's been named the starter for that West semifinal, wherever it is. If it's in Saskatchewan or if it's in Winnipeg, we'll find out this weekend. But just when we thought BC was kind of limping into the playoffs, I feel like that win over Montreal gave them a bit of a boost, and they're going to be a tough out now, whoever faces them in the first round.
There's a lot of people who've been watching that, right? With Nathan Rourke going in and not playing exceptionally well. It is Vernon Adams' team, right? The league, the players have said that. They've told reporters that. They not that they dislike Nathan Rourke. There was just a rhythm established with Vernon Adams as their quarterback. And to get that back and have that going into the playoffs, I think that's really been an optimistic bump for the Lions, who didn't have any optimism, had no enthusiasm when they played at Mosaic Stadium a couple of weeks ago. So this has given them a real boost in the arm, and it suddenly made them a very tough team to play against in the playoffs.
And there was a question, I think, the other week in the reader mailbag that I fielded, and it said, what would be the best case scenario for the Riders to finish in second place and face BC, or to finish in first? And the obvious answer is to finish in first place and take on the winner of the Lions and the Bombers. But with the Riders coming in hot already, obviously they've won 4 straight. I think this game against Calgary on Saturday is not a must-win game, but you do want to feel good heading into the playoffs. So if they're riding a 5-game winning streak heading into the semifinal, they put together a good game against BC. They're obviously heading into this final now on a 6-game winning streak, and then you have a Bombers team that's coming off a loss, coming off a win over the Bombers or over the Alouettes, but off a bye week, and then you have a team coming with 6 in a row. So you have sort of that coming in hot with all the momentum versus a team coming off a bye week. It's not necessarily a bad situation to be in. Obviously, you do want to finish first, but they could be on a roll heading into that West Final.
Yeah, for a few years it used to work that way, Taylor. You're right that the teams coming in after winning the semifinal were often progressing, beating the first place team. That's changed in the last few years. The teams are better prepared. They know how to rest. They know how to scout and prep for the other teams. Add some trick plays in, change their offenses a little bit. So no longer is it an advantage to finish in second. Maybe for a while people thought it was. That question that you got for the mailbag, there's never a reason. If you don't have to play that extra game, never, ever do it, right? Why would you risk it? Because anything can happen. We've seen teams. I watched in 1989 Saskatchewan Roughriders, a 9-9 football team win the Grey Cup because they got some momentum going. You never allow anybody an extra chance. Never force yourself to play an extra game. As you said, injuries can happen. An upset can happen. Look at the Hilltops losing to the Regina Thunder in the Prairie Junior Final, right? If they didn't have to play that game and could have walked just into a game against Okanagan, I'm sure they would have taken that. But the Thunder was a hot team. So you never take a chance of playing a game. If you can get a bye into first place, rest your guys, have home field advantage, do an extra week of game study and game prep, that's what you want. And when you look at the numbers over the last few years, the first place team has advanced way more than the second place team has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously home field is a big advantage in the West Final. So if the Riders can get that, it'll be a tough environment for whoever to come in, and it'll be cold, I imagine, that week in November.
It might be. Who knows, right?
Who knows? Or it might be hot. Again, who knows?
Yeah.
We've got pretty good weather, but still a few weeks away. But when you look
I have a point. Well, sorry. I want, Sam Emelis and Trevor Harris were doing the weather forecast on CTV last week, so maybe we could ask them what type of weather's coming up.
Yeah, there you go. So looking ahead to this week, obviously a lot of Rider fans will be focused on the Saskatchewan-Calgary matchup, but I think even more sort of leading up, we'll be watching that Winnipeg-Montreal game. And to me, Montreal has to put together a good effort. They have nothing to play for in the standings, but I think they have everything to play for when it comes to momentum. They're going to have a bye in the first round of the playoffs, but they're coming off that loss to BC, as I mentioned, on the weekend. So if they, put a dud performance against Winnipeg on there, and they have absolutely no momentum heading into the playoffs. And I think Ottawa's kind of in the same situation. They haven't looked good, and then all of a sudden Toronto's coming on. So Toronto gets by Ottawa in the East semifinal, then all of a sudden is riding a pretty good streak heading into Montreal for the East final. So, like I said, Montreal, I think, has a lot to play for momentum-wise on Saturday against the Bombers.
Yeah, the East has really changed, hasn't it? It used to be Montreal, but weird schedule for them. That weird bye that they just got off of. Cody Fajardo goes home for a while, comes back and is the starter. They rest him for a part of it. He doesn't want to be rested. He says in a halftime interview, I want to play, but they're using Davis Alexander, who wasn't great. And then they're going to have that bye that might be crippling. Of course, as we said, you don't want to play it, but sometimes you do want to have some rhythm going. And the Alouettes may have lost that. But I tell you, Toronto looked darn good. They're a tough team to cheer for. I know a lot of people feel that way. But boy, oh boy, that defense has been strong all season. And as much as you hate to admit it, Chad Kelly played exceptionally well at quarterback for the Argonauts, using the weapons at his disposal. And, if you're picking right now, I'm saying the Toronto Argonauts are coming out of the East. I don't know yet who's coming out of the West, but that would be my choice for the Eastern representative.
Yeah, interesting, because Montreal has sort of, they look so good to start, but then they haven't been that dominant team as of late. So Davis Alexander, still a good quarterback. Cody Fajardo, obviously, we know what he can do. So whoever does start and gets the most of the playing time, I think they need to put together a good effort on Saturday against the Bombers.
So different from last year, isn't it, Taylor? Because last year the Alouettes got really hot halfway through. Remember Darnell Sankey, the linebacker, came in. They didn't lose a game down the home stretch, and just carried that right through the Grey Cup playoffs. So you're right. Momentum is a huge thing. A lot of people think momentum doesn't mean anything game to game, but I don't know. In football, I seem to see it building quite a bit, right? The longer seasons of baseball and hockey, maybe they go up and down a bit, but football is kind of, we're on a roll now, and you feel that confidence, and you're trying new things, and everything you do seems to go your way, right? We've seen the Roughriders do that. They're a team of momentum, right? They won 5 of their first 6 games. They won their first 4. They've won 4 in a row now. Had that 7-game streak in the middle without a win. So they are a team of momentum, and I think it happens an awful lot in football that you don't get as many chances to bounce back from a skid, and if you're on a roll, you just put one after another, and all of a sudden 4 in a row, and that's what they are right now. So momentum is a big thing. Once again, if you want to rest, I'm sure Winnipeg would like to rest in the West and get a bye just to make sure everything's okay. But sometimes that momentum isn't a bad thing to have going into playoffs.
And, so that's obviously a big Saturday in the CFL with the Alouettes and Bombers, followed by the Riders and Stampeders. A lot to play for, potentially, I guess, for the Riders in that final game, and potentially not. We'll have to wait and see. But elsewhere, this is a Rough Rider podcast, but I do want to highlight a couple of other big games in the area this weekend. First of all, you mentioned earlier Regina Thunder beating the Saskatoon Hilltops in the PFC final. Congratulations to them, first of all, but now they, celebrate that PFC league victory and now get set for the CJFL semifinal with a trip to the Canadian Bowl on the line.
Yeah, the Okanagan Sun, a perennial strong team out of BC, is the BC representative. They'll be playing at Libel Field on this coming Sunday at 1 p.m. Very strong team. I've watched the Thunder play quite a bit this year. That 2-prong running attack they have of Sadiq and Rylan Likert, amazing. And Sadiq scored 2 touchdowns last game. He got 3 earlier this year. They've done it with changing quarterbacks, right? Ethan Hugg and Carter Moberg have switched in and out, but an amazing group of linebackers that they have, including Stephen Smith, who's pretty well known around here, Defensive Player of the Year in his conference 2 years in a row. Just to beat the Hilltops is a huge, huge step for them. They're the reigning Canadian champions, so it's going to be quite a weekend. That's the Sunday game after the Riders play at home on Saturday, and you're going to tell us about the Friday game too, right?
Yeah, there's lots at stake for the Regina Rams on Friday night. They lost to the Huskies on the weekend, but still are in playoff contention. However, they need to beat Alberta, they're tied for the last playoff spot with Alberta, so a playoff spot is on the line Friday night at Libel as the Rams face the Golden Bears. The winner's in, then the loser's season will be over. The
Rams started so well, right? Winning those first 2 games, including a huge game over Saskatchewan, which hasn't happened around here for a long, long time. So the fact that the Rams have faltered a little bit, but still have one more opportunity. They've lost 2 tough last second games, right, against Calgary and against Saskatchewan. That win put Saskatchewan in the playoffs, so it's a big one for the Huskies, and not a crushing one yet for the Rams. So if you like football and you're in Regina this weekend, buy some tickets.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of good games. And one other thing about the Rams is that I think they lost 30-6 to Alberta earlier in the season, but coming off, there was a 22-20 loss against the Huskies. They're right there, right? So if they could have just found that final play, that I think it was the 2-point convert that was unsuccessful, and somehow got a couple points out of it, they would be into the playoffs. We wouldn't be talking about how meaningful Friday's game is. So for the Rams, they need a good effort in what has been a strange season after starting kind of a surprising 2-0 start. They have faltered down the stretch, and the Canada season is so short that you can't really have a have a lackluster effort on a week-to-week basis, or else you're going to be way out of the playoff contention by week 6 or 7.
Yeah, the way things looked at the beginning of the year, we thought the Rams were the hottest new team, and Manitoba was going to take off with the conference if Regina would be trying to keep up. But Manitoba's been knocked back to earth a little bit too. So once again, as often happens in Can West, it's anybody's ball game.
Yeah, and back to the CFL, I do want to talk about the Saskatchewan Roughriders team awards that are coming out this week. They'll be announced on Wednesday. I think we all presume Roland Milligan will be the Roughriders' most outstanding player, and I also presume that Brady Oliveira will be Winnipeg's most outstanding player, and I assume those two will be in the running for the West Division MOP award. Does Milligan have a chance, or is it going to go to Brady Oliveira? I think Justin McInnes, I guess, would probably be BC's. We'll see. I don't imagine Vernon Adams will get any votes, although maybe he does. After such a strange year, he looked like the easy MOP frontrunner to start the season, but then obviously lost a bit of playing time and then got hurt. And then I don't think anybody from Edmonton or Calgary will be in the running for that West Division vote.
No easy choices, are there? Which is the way it should be, I think. But usually you have somebody who's having the most astounding season you can imagine. And with the Roughriders, there's a bunch of guys having good ones. Obviously, Roland Milligan is having when you think he's leading the league in special teams tackles or is up there, depending on when we see this week's stats and leading the league in interceptions. And nobody's ever led special teams and led another defensive category. So that shows you what a versatile and all-around player he is and how hard he plays in every position. He makes game-changing plays. That's what defensive players have to do. When Solomon Elimimian was the only defensive player to win the league's outstanding player award as a defensive player, that's what he did. He turned games around with his play. That's what Roland Milligan does. So he certainly deserves consideration, whether he wins or not. It's tough to knock Brady Oliveira's statistics. He's an offensive player on a team that may end up in first place, and that's something you're looking at going into it. Either one of those players, I'm thinking, and McInnes too. He had another great game when with Vernon Adams back throwing to him. Those are pretty good choices, and you could quibble with any one of them, or you could say, you know what, they're all good choices. It would be interesting if Tyrese Beverette, the linebacker from the Montreal Alouettes, became the outstanding player and outstanding defensive player from the East, and we had a showdown between two defensive players for the outstanding player award. Would be kind of novel, and obviously there would be another defensive winner for that award. But those are two players who have had totally outstanding seasons, and it's not as if the defenses have dominated in the Canadian Football League this year. There's been some great offensive performances, but some of these players on defense are also making a name for themselves, and that's probably one of the reasons the vote's tough to do, but it also makes the CFL pretty exciting because you get to know some defensive stars as well as just the offensive guys.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at Trevor Harris's numbers, if he didn't miss 6 games, I think he would be sort of the shoe-in for that MOP award. As good as Roland Milligan has been, if Trevor Harris doesn't miss 6 games and he puts up the numbers similar to what sort of Bo Levi Mitchell has done in the East, Bo Levi Mitchell is probably not going to get many votes because his team missed the playoffs. But he puts together a 5,000-yard season and looks good. And if you look at history, oftentimes this award just goes to a quarterback, right? So Bo Levi Mitchell would have been the easy answer if Hamilton got into the playoffs, and if Trevor Harris didn't miss 6 games, he'd be the easiest answer too.
Yeah, quarterback stats are easy, and they're always impressive, right? How many yards, how many touchdowns, how many interceptions, how many yards do they add rushing, which Trevor Harris doesn't do much of, but the things that they've done. But you can also say Trevor Harris hadn't missed any games, and Vernon Adams didn't miss as many games because he was hurt. That's the reason he lost his job initially. Then who is it, right? So it's a lot of toss-ups. Quarterbacks do usually get the attention, and you think of them because, as we said, there's no position more important in any sport, I don't think, than the CFL quarterback. But it's fun to watch this year that there are so many potential choices, and it's really created an interest in the Football Reporters of Canada balloting this year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting and still lots to be decided. The team awards will be presented this week, and then, of course, the division awards will be presented shortly thereafter, and then that leads up to the CFL Awards, which will be held during Grey Cup week in Vancouver. And the teams, of course, that'll be in that will still to be determined, and we'll find out more this weekend. in the final week of the regular season, with still a lot to be decided, at least standings wise. But we know which 6 teams are going to be in, and we've known that. I think you wrote about that. We've known that for a while now. Which 6 teams will be in. Now it's just a matter of who's going to play where and when.
Yeah. We're pretty. I think we know the East, right? The East is pretty well solid, but the West, at least there's something that might make it a little bit more interesting. It's strange how that happens when 2 out of your 3 teams make it. Like in each division, 6 out of 9 teams make it. You would think that there would be teams vying for it, but the way that Edmonton, Calgary, and Hamilton started the season just put them behind in a corner right away and made it so difficult for them to challenge. They've had flashes. Well, Calgary, not so much, but Edmonton and Hamilton have had some decent flashes of performance. And you wonder, gee, if the schedule was longer or they had one more game along the way there, what would this finish be like? Right now, it's not that exciting. That's why the playoffs are going to be so good, because these teams are primed and ready and have performed well enough to make it to the playoffs. As I said, Toronto out of the East, I think. Saskatchewan's got as good a chance as anybody out of the West, don't they, Taylor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Lots to be discussed.
You're not predicting?
No, I'm not going to throw a prediction out there. I'm going to say lots to be discussed.
Okay, I'll leave you with that one then. Okay.
We'll see once playoffs roll around. Maybe we'll get some Grey Cup predictions. All right, Darrell, that'll do it for episode 155. Thanks, as always, for joining, and talk to you next week.
You bet. We get to go to practice this week. I'm looking forward to it. See you, Taylor.
All right, see ya.